Hello there, fearfully and wonderfully made human. It's me, Diana, from Through the Valley Therapy and Transform Mind Consulting and Coaching. If you've been with me for a while, you know this podcast does not shy away from hard but necessary conversations. We've explored domestic violence in Christian marriages, church trauma, and the ways faith can be twisted to silence survivors. As a Christian BIPOC therapist, I believe it's not only important, but essential to bring these stories into the light for the sake of healing, protection, and pointing us back to the heart of Christ. Today's episode carries weight. We'll be talking about domestic violence, spiritual abuse, and trauma. So before we dive in, I want to give a gentle trigger warning. Please listen with care and step away if you need to. If you or someone you love is experiencing abuse, I'll include resources in the show notes, including the National Domestic Violence Hotline, so you know you're not walking this road alone. I first came across today's guest on the Roy's Report in an episode with Leslie Vernick and Julie Roy's called Abuse is No Reason for Divorce, Responding to Calvary Chapel Sermon. I had already been following Leslie's work, and after the heartbreaking story of Micah Miller, the YouTube algorithm introduced me to Julie's reporting. And then, bam, I heard the voice of today's guest, and something clicked. I vaguely remembered the headlines above about the Save Saeed movement years ago. But when I listened to her and then picked up her book, I Didn't Survive, Emerging Whole After Deception, Persecution, and Hidden Abuse, I realized there was so much more to the story than I ever knew. I reached out, and she graciously said yes to being here today. Born in Tehran in 1977, Naghmeh Abedini Panahi immigrated to the U.S. as a child and converted from Islam to Christianity. She later returned to Iran as a businesswoman and missionary, where she witnessed firsthand the oppression faced by Christians and women. Alongside her then husband Saeed, she helped lead one of the largest house church movements in Iran until persecution forced them back to the U.S. In 2012, Saeed was arrested in Iran, and Naghmeh became the global face of the Save Saeed campaign, appealing to presidents, Congress, the United Nations, and major media outlets worldwide for his release. Today, she is the co-founder and executive director of the Tahir al-Nisa Foundation, serving women and children impacted by domestic abuse and religiously motivated violence. Through her advocacy, her book, and her speaking, she has become a powerful voice for survivors and a needed wake-up call for the church. And before we go into our conversation, I wanted to read some of her prologue. I am not sharing my experiences to spin a tale of how I was able to make it through tough times in my marriage, but rather to tell you who I became because of those tough times. I can't tell you how I was able to make it through because I didn't. I didn't survive. The old me died in the process, burned in the fires of trials. I am not the same person today that I was before. People who have had a hard time getting out of an abusive relationship are often those who attempt to drag their old selves, their old ways of thinking through it. I couldn't. I didn't. Like the phoenix rising from the ashes, a new me arose from the catastrophe of my marriage. This book is about how I learned and grew along the way, despite my mistakes, false perspectives, confusion, and battered self-image. As my understanding grew, I also grew. As my challenges grew, so did my faith, and with this faith, my ability to endure pain. The pain didn't become easier. It never does. But I became stronger. In order to survive, I had to change, and that is my story. I didn't want to change, but the obstacle of Saeed's imprisonment finally forced me to. The obstacle led to the solution. What had stood in the way, ironically, became the way. If Saeed had not gone to prison in Iran, it is highly likely that I would still be sitting in my own prison. I would still be living in the chains of an abusive marriage, but his imprisonment eventually set me free from mine. I believe God wanted Saeed to be delivered from the Iranian prison, yet he did not want me to remain in my own captivity. When I realized I needed to change, I didn't yet know what that change would look like. But I was certain the solution to the problem started at the genesis of my failure. And confronting that failure would give birth to thinking differently and, and redefining who I was according to the Word of God. Obstacles have a unique way of breaking the chains of how we define ourselves. The fake me had to die. It began to disintegrate when it collided with the immovable wall of reality, which presented problems I couldn't solve by my old ways of thinking and old methods of survival. I know some people reading this book may think that I gave up on my marriage. I never quit on my marriage. I fought to keep my marriage, but I had to learn to let it go. I had to learn that quitting and letting go are not the same thing. I could have been the wife of a Christian hero, but I gave that up. Christian leaders even told me to hide the abuse in my life in order to keep up appearances, in order to maintain the advocacy. That life of lies offered a guaranteed income, favored status, and a comfortable lifestyle, but I decided to give it up for truth. I could have continued to mold a public image that people looked up to, and I might even have convinced myself that I was doing it for God, but I gave it all up. When I realized I was an abused wife, I was holding a handful of broken dreams, but not a broken future. My false self was crumbling away, but healing and wholeness were entering into me through my wounds like light breaking through the cracks in the walls of an abandoned building. The light shining through was teaching me that many of my dreams have been shattered only because they were not really my dreams. I had long held the dreams of someone else, and I had been caged in by the expectations of others. I had also been trapped for years in memories of fear and loss that reached all the way back to my childhood in war torn Iran. This is my story of how I was able to break free. Naghmeh, it's, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. It is such an honor for you to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I got teary-eyed too, because it's just the power and the love of God to use I hindsight to look and how he used Said's imprisonment for his one hurting sheep to set me free. So
Wow. All right. So, for those that don't know, because I did read some of it where I had to look back and going, I do remember when was this happening? This was around 2012, correct? Can you?
between 2012 and 2017 when 2016 when he got out.
Okay. What feels important for you to share about your personal journey during those years?
The years that I was advocating for him.
Yeah. Just what's coming up.
The beginning, um, so yeah, a lot of people might still remember my face, or they'll be like, yeah, I remember I posted about the Save Saeed thing, or, I read about it. It was pretty widespread. It became a movement. At the beginning of it, I remember the first interview I had was with Hannity on Fox, and the person I was very afraid, very insecure, and not just on how I looked because of the marriage I had been in that just tore apart everything about how I looked, my hair color, my skin color, my everything. Like,
Wait, what do you mean by that? I want to go in there because to me, I'm like, wait a minute, we have the same hair color and skin color,
yeah.
me and you, girl.
He liked blonde. So a lot of times in our marriage, I would try to like lighten my hair. He liked whiter skin and um the Persian culture, unfortunately, that like the darker you are, you're not as pretty. The lighter you are, you're prettier. So like I was, especially in the uh, summer months, I get really dark, and then but I can like turn to two different colors.
Yeah.
And so he criticized my skin color, but everything, like my eyebrows, he would say, you need to do surgery to pull them up. So it pulls up your eyes,
Oh
my
my word.
nose. So it
Wow.
just, it was gradually started like with,
Yeah.
like,
That's,
so yeah. So being in front of cameras, I had, it was live with Hannity on Fox, my first interview, and I wasn't actually in studio with him. So he wasn't there. It was just cameras in my room
hmm
to cover Saeed's imprisonment. And so I was looking at a camera. Could hear Hannity in my ear, and here there's this insecure person about how I how I looked, but
Yeah.
also like how I thought. I didn't trust that. I'd become a shell of a person where I checked everything with Saeed. He told me what to do in everything, on how to dress, what to cook, who
Wow.
I could see, who I couldn't see. So my life had become a complete control.
Yeah.
So I was in front of a camera thinking, what am I going to say? I'm stupid. I'm worthless. All these
Oh,
lies were in my
right.
head. And you have with a live, you have like five, like not even 5 minutes. Like it just seems like so quick before they go to the next story. And I remember I was like with deer with headlights, like I was just like looking at the camera, kind of like, my husband is in prison. I don't even know what I said.
Yeah.
I remember I wasn't too emotional. After a few camera interviews, I think the first time it took a few interviews for where I finally like was comfortable with the cameras, where I was just like finally like was able to cry, and
Yeah.
actually, but I felt like I was very robotic, and so it ended, the reason I'm saying this is the journey, the person I was, like very insecure, very in every way. And when it ended, I thought I failed. Like, no one's going to want to try to rescue Saeed. Like, I didn't convey what I needed to convey on the one chance I had. And it was actually the opposite. People were like, you're so beautiful. You spoke so well. You're so well spoken. And I kept getting invited to media and like you said, Congress and all over the world. And I was now speaking, someone who had been told you're worthless, you're like stupid, all of that. And through, yeah,
Can I ask,
yes.
was this like from the beginning of your relationship? Because I mean, because I work with a lot of women that come out of abuse of all
Mm-hmm.
sorts, right? And so to me, that's emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it puts you in your place. It is something that, do you know, did it start like that? Or because to me, many people that are going to be listening to this will feel that tug in their heart without knowing exactly what it is. Because I know if you're sitting there and all of a sudden something came over you and you felt like the shell of a person, that would be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? That's your
Mm,
nervous system
yes.
going protection. It's protecting you so you can move forward because it's a hard place to
Mm-hmm.
be in a relationship that you're thinking this is what love is and that's all you really
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew. And so
Yes.
you had to disentangle a lot of different things because it's like, I love you and I hate you. And
Yeah.
right? And holding both of those parts, it's like, whoa. And
So
many,
confusing.
it is so confusing. So am I allowed? I mean, it's okay if you don't want to go in there because I
Yeah.
do not
No.
want to redo any trauma of anything.
No. No. It's been years, and God has, like I said, I've become a new creation, and I'm still working through some things, but
Yeah.
no, because I was actually, people think someone who's been abused is like already like low self-esteem, already like I was confident. I was a businesswoman. I studied pre-med. My dad was always like, I have a twin brother and a younger sister. Of the three of us, he would always point to me and be like, "You're like me. You're a business." Like he would always, like inject a lot of pride, like confidence in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a very confident person. And even in my looks, like I didn't think I was like, I never really like was like, oh, I'm like amazing, beautiful. But like guys liked me. I didn't think I was ugly. I didn't like. So it has been gradually. It's like a frog in a warm water, not a hot water. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
just gradual. Like, yeah, you have a little bump on your nose. Like it would be good at like, and then it was just gradual questioning of how I looked.
Yeah.
And
So it was like
gradual,
a
it
chip
was a
away,
joy.
like a little bit, a word here,
Hmm.
something there, and it made you feel, did it make you feel uncomfortable? And then you're like, okay, and then you ignored it? Because I
Yes.
would, yeah, because to me, like, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
go ahead. Yeah,
Well,
because yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, Naghmeh, because I just want the audience to really understand this because
Hmm.
many women are still going through this. And
Yes.
for you to be out of that valley, right? And now that you go back and you're probably a mentor, or like you're speaking in your purpose now and trying to prevent this from happening to other women. I
Mm.
just want to understand the red flags you see now.
Yes. Well, I was raised in a purity culture and also a culture that said shut off your emotion. So, yes, I did feel like that's weird he said that. Like, I thought of because I was raised in a purity culture and I'm also Middle Eastern. I didn't date, I didn't hold hands, I didn't kiss. So, Saeed was like my first everything. And I was raised in culture, Christian culture that says your emotions are evil. Like, you can't be led by your emotions.
Wow.
And so, the emotions that God had given me to alarm me of certain things, I kept shutting off. Hindsight, now looking back. So the red flags were like alarm, alarm, alarm. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's evil. I need to shut those down. And so, and I know maybe many of your listeners were told the same thing that, um, I think one of the verses that's used, it's like in Jeremiah, it says the heart is deceptive beyond all or something like that. Like your emotions, your heart, what you're feeling is like not God, and you got to be more like, I don't know. You got to shut that off if you want to be a godly person. So, yes, my alarms were going off. Because I thought if a guy likes me, I've had guys like me, they're not going to start like, your eyes are not pretty, your nose, your hair. And then we'd go out to dinner and he was like looking, you could tell he was looking past me to other women.
Wow.
My heart would just break. And he didn't have the awe of like your gorgeous look, but I also felt like I was maybe prideful. Like I wanted, like my dad always like lifted me up, so like um, build me up with confidence. So I thought, maybe I'm used to like people going, you're amazing, and so I thought maybe I need to like
Mm,
be crushed. My pride needs to be crushed of like a guy doesn't need to be worshiping you or saying you're amazing all the time.
right.
Yeah. But it was other things too. So he would say, we would start talking about Bible and I would say, yeah, the Lord, this is what God showed me today. And he'd be like, are you sure? Like, I think this is what it's saying. I don't
Mm,
think it's like, so he started questioning my understanding of Bible as well, my relationship with God. So it was like all gradual, but it got to a point where a year after a year and a half after we were married in Iran, we ended up in Dubai, and that's the first physical like full on beating happened. Uh, from that point up to then, it was a lot of emotional, like, which I didn't know was abuse,
right.
spiritual. When the full on beating happened, I was pregnant with my daughter. From then, that's when he got me completely. Until then, I was still, there was a little bit of like, I still had like this confidence a little bit. Like I was still like, wait a minute, why is he saying that? And one of the things also he did, he started questioning because he was very charismatic. He would say, God's given him spiritual gifts. He would say, your sister has spiritual problem, your mom, your blah, blah, blah. So over time, he isolated me because he
Yeah.
was saying they've got spiritual problems. I see it, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. So it was all of this until a year and a half after we were married, the physical happened. And then from there, I was just like, that's when I became a shell of myself. That was like, I was walking on eggshells. I became completely obedient. I was like, he can literally kill me. I'm pregnant. I can't leave him. I'm damaged goods. Like the purity movement, I kept myself pure, hadn't had sex with him. Like, I'm like, now I've had sex. Like there was sexual abuse, of course, which I didn't know
Right.
in our marriage. And now I'm like, now I gotta stay. And I'm pregnant. And I have a daughter coming into this world. So yeah, I think the physical abuse was like the final. It was like the seal of like, okay, I'm gonna submit no matter what, because he can actually kill me. And so
Yeah.
that's when I start really becoming a shell of myself, where I just shut down my emotion. If I cried, he would say, you're manipulating me, you're trying to like control me by crying. If
Oh my
like I couldn't show emotion, you know, like someone you
God. Yeah.
love, you want to be like, I'm really hurting. This is really hurting me. He would say, you're trying to manipulate me
Right.
with
That's
tears.
okay. Naghmeh, let me tell you, because I'm a therapist and I've worked with many clients that come out or are in it and they realize, like, oh my goodness. Have you ever heard of the Christian Duluth model
No.
of abuse? And I'm going to put it in the show notes because
Hmm.
what you're speaking about, Naghmeh, is something, and there, and us therapists, we have the words. And I mean, I have not met your ex, but it is the epitome of narcissistic abuse. Even if he did not put hands on you, there in the Duluth model, it shows what these things that happen because especially if you don't know, right? There is no
Hmm.
like if I want to go into the purity culture a little because I
Yeah.
do have quite a few clients that are now Gen Zers that come out of the purity or millennials that have been, they're 20, 24, 25, coming out of marriages like what you're talking about. And they didn't. And now this is the grief that they're processing with me is the I still love Jesus, but I don't understand, and now I'm going to hell. Basically,
Yeah.
that's their thought process,
Hmm.
Nagme, because of that. So can you explain how you see purity culture?
Yeah, and I want to say it's back. My daughter is just turned 19 and she's on TikTok and she's like, "Mom, I need to cover up." Like there's this girl she was following that like literally went from like normal tights workout clothes to like baggy and she cut her hair because it could be attractive to men. And she's a like big TikToker and she's
Mm,
talking about mom, should I be covered up? And which is not bad, but the purity culture basically put the burden, the sin of the man on the woman. Like you have to be covered up. It reminded me of the religion I came out of, Islam. That the burden of he sinning is on you. You are responsible. That's what I got from it. And also and then also that if you shouldn't hold hands or kiss before marriage even,
mhm.
and if you do, you are tainted, like you are. And so
Right.
it kind of gives the idea, which abusers, which you can probably talk more into that, cross sexual boundaries early, which is part of my story, which I share in my book, because then now they have you. They
Yeah.
cross sexual boundaries. Now they have you. And if you come from the purity culture, you're like, yeah, they have me. He just like touched me and I just touched him. And now even if before the sex stuff, like which
Right.
ours was pretty much like he pushed the boundary to a point where we were not having sex, but
Okay. I hear that
we
a
were
lot.
we were
We
doing
did
a lot.
everything else but
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah. And so but you know in your spirit like I am having sex like we've crossed certain boundaries and so they pushed the boundary and so with the purity culture in my mind I was like I didn't think I could walk away. There was several times in our courting, which courting is also another thing, is like you're basically dating to marry. You're just on, it's not dating to go to see how you're like, oh, I don't feel good about this. And you're supposed to shut down those feelings anyways. So it's dating with the goal of marriage. So you're not really like put in this situation where you're like, I can walk away. Like, this is the road going to marriage, unless there's like huge things that happen, we're headed towards marriage. And so
Yeah.
that the purity culture really had me take on a lot of his sin on myself.
Yeah.
And also think I was tainted. If I maybe hadn't been influenced by the purity culture, I could have walked away. You know, the
I,
courting. I could have walked away when he beat me. Like, I'm not tainted. I'm not damaged goods, even though I am pregnant and I had sex. Like, I can walk away. Then the purity movement told me not, like, no.
no, because divorce is a huge sin. And I remember, okay, so you know my story a little bit, Nagme. I became a Christian at 29. I was
Mhm.
married at 23 to a Southern Baptist preacher kid who was rebellious. So it was just like we met each other. We weren't each other's first, okay?
Mhm.
And I grew up on the streets of like New York until I was 12 and then came down to South Florida. I raised Catholic with Santeria background. And
Mhm.
so I know who Jesus is in the mind, right? Crucifix, all this stuff. 29 became a Christian. And then I started questioning things constantly. because I was reading the Bible for myself.
Mm,
And my husband's like, go get him. Like, so,
mhm,
but I just want you to understand this is when I started understanding the period because I was a youth counselor and I'm like, you want me to teach what? I'm like, no, like, I'm not teaching that. Like, we all, it doesn't matter what's in between your legs. That's all I kept saying. And these people,
mm.
especially the men,
Like,
were like,
whoa.
yeah, what? What is she saying? And they would go to my husband and say, you need to get your wife to be submissive.
Well, look at God's amazing plan that you weren't groomed by that culture. So you could like say things like that. You weren't asleep. You were like, I'm reading my Bible. That's not what it says.
Yeah. Yeah. But they tried really hard to put a thumb on me.
Mm,
And I'm grateful that I do have a person in my life. I was his second wife because he
mm,
already, let me tell you, he got it really bad because he got divorced and he
oh,
tried everything to keep it together and
mm,
they made him feel like crap.
mm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So he got it.
So he understood when I came along and, this fiery Latina came along that was raised by a bunch of women. So anyway, I get it. And this is where I get angry. Like, I don't know if you saw, I'm like going like this when you're telling me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I get it because I saw it in the church because it was the year 2000 when I became a Christian. And I'm in a Southern Baptist church in South Florida. And that's when I started questioning things. And the pastors they didn't know what to do
Were
with
you
how I
kicked
behaved.
out?
No, because my husband was a very well respected man in that church.
Mhm. Okay.
But we left. I left. Actually, I left first because to me, he's like, honey, don't listen to them. The only thing it says here in the word is to be submissive to me. And I'm telling you to fly.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And so he never really was that. Everyone
Yeah.
else
It's not
tried.
saying be submissive to church leadership.
Exactly. But that's what they try to put
Yeah.
on us, right?
Yeah.
Jezebel spirit. Oh, she has a Jezebel spirit. And
And
I'm
your
like,
husband's like, no,
yeah, go ahead, honey. We
I
live in
got
South
the
Florida.
Jezebel too.
Did you really?
I got the Jezebel. When I stood up, when I finally stood up and had boundaries, I was called Jezebel and a feminist and all of that. You
Yeah,
feminist.
yeah, and that's how I got saved, Naghmeh. You know how? At FAU Women's Studies course, studying women and religion, Islam. Okay, I was had the Quran,
Mm.
the Torah, and the Bible,
Wow.
and I was realizing Jesus was the one that kept bringing women forward. And I'm going, wait, what? Huh? What? Who is this? And I'm like, and that's when I was saved. That's when I was like, I will forever follow this man for the rest of my
Yes.
life.
That's what I say. I keep saying what I share a lot is I came out of Islam, and when we treat women like the way of other religions, we're no different than the other religions. But you read the Bible, the way women were honored and and even submission, the way Jesus says leadership and submission is actually you're in place of power to serve. You're not in place of power to dominate. Like God's like, nope, if you're in a place of power, you're to serve. And like in Ephesians, it says submit to one another. Like there's this mutual submission and if you really look into it, it's a submission by example. Like it's not like obey me. It's kind of like living a life of this servanthood and leading people by example, and so you read Jesus's, you look at Jesus's way in leadership, to be in a place of leadership, to only give up that power to serve. And it's so different than the rest of the world and religions of the world and Islam that I came out of. And it's so beautiful the way he honors and just women and uses them, and they're part of his crowd. The message of the resurrection's given to them, the just everything. Junior, you got the apostle, you got the deacon, you got so
Phoebe, Deborah, we can keep
yeah.
going.
And even Abigail, who was not submissive to her husband, so because he was wicked, like there's no submission. You're not supposed to submit to abuse and corruption. And you see that in the Bible all the time. You see it with Ananias and Sapphira. Like she could have said, no, he's lying, and she separated from her husband's lie of, about the money. So you see that all through the Bible. Like you're not supposed to submit to abuse and corruption, but then you're told you are supposed to submit to your husband no matter what, which is not true. So that's another thing so like you said, like a lot of Muslims in Iran are becoming Christian because they're reading about the Jesus in the Bible, And they're like, he loves us, he honors us. And they've been like in this culture of like being crushed and abused. And so many women are following Christ in the Middle East because of exactly what you said.
I love that. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm getting emotional because I think I put myself in the positions of a lot of people. My empathy is way through the roof. Naghmeh, it's not healthy at all.
Mm. Oh.
But because I do understand, like,
Mm.
a woman, I think about that. Like, I have this freedom here in this country, right? And I have the freedom of speech and me, this right here. And I
Mm.
have a family that backs me up to be who I am. But then I think of the person, say, in Saudi Arabia, who is forced to wear a
Yeah.
burqa,
Hmm.
and and if she speaks at all, she could get stoned to death.
Hmm. She
What
has
the,
no right.
no rights. And here in the Christian church, the American Christian church, that is something I think I've been really trying to fight in my humility, not in my ego, because in my
Mm.
ego and pride come in, then I get angry and I become a
Hmm.
pit bull.
Me too.
And this is what I love, Naghmeh, is that I need for the audience to know, how did you get out from what you just shared early on this podcast to where you are now? How did you do it?
Exactly what you said, Jesus and the Bible. And my abuser, God separated my abuser that I couldn't separate from through his imprisonment long enough to get me to his word and what his word said. And during the years he was in prison, as I read the Bible, God spoke to me like, the institution of marriage, I didn't die for the institution of marriage. I died for you. What you're going through, the pain and the suffering, like, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with it having the name of my name on it, Christ on it, and you suffering in this way. And I didn't come to and so as I read about even Sabbath, like Jesus stood up and it was like, it's more about compassion than institution. And so it was because people say, how did you not walk away from the faith? I'm like, it was Jesus himself through the word, like God himself through the word and prayer and Holy Spirit. It was God himself that rescued me and said, you are wrong. You're staying in a marriage that's literally destroying you. And it's causing a divide, between it was causing a divide between me and God. And I know like a lot of people you work with might have had that. When you're under abuse, you have a different understanding of God. And really deep down, you might say, I'm a Christian, but deep down, you're kind of like, I'm just going to separate from this God. Like for him to want me to submit no matter what. And so there was such a big, right before Saeed's imprisonment, actually, I was a shell person, but my relationship with God was so separate. Like
Yeah,
I could
that's
barely
normal.
pray. I could barely pray. I could barely read the Bible. Then Saeed goes to prison and I'm like clinging to the Bible. I'm praying and he's speaking to me and he's setting me free through, I think you said your counseling is like to transform, being transformed.
Yeah, Transform Mind Consulting and Coaching is my consulting and coaching
Because you
company.
said that,
And
I was like,
yeah,
that's what happened to me.
Romans 12 too. Yeah.
I love that because God was transforming my mind through his word, he was setting me free. And so
Oh,
that's how I was set free. I was still afraid of divorce. That was like the big demonic. So I didn't divorce as I didn't know he was going to come out of prison, but I did draw boundaries. I said, no more. When he came out, I filed for legal separation. I said, you need to get help on your porn addiction. He had actually cheated on me. Not, I think porn is cheating. The Bible says looking at a woman lustfully, but he'd actually slept around with other women that I realized.
so
And
you had every reason,
mhm,
biblically speaking, you had every reason for divorce, because isn't that what it says in the word?
but still God said, which like it's a wrong interpretation, but in my mind, I thought God hates divorce. So I was still
Ah,
afraid because it says like you can divorce for adultery, but
right.
if because of your hardness of heart, I was like, so I just was like so afraid of the divorce. So I didn't divorce him. I filed for a legal separation. I said, I'll wait here for you until you get the help that you need. And he filed for divorce. My
Oh,
boundary with him was like unacceptable because I'd never drawn boundaries. And he actually said, when I drew boundaries and I said, get help, he saw as me leading and being a Jezebel. Now I was taking control of the relationship. He saw it as a way of me now becoming the man in the
Oh
relationship.
my.
So he boundaries for him meant I was trying to control him. So
Yeah.
he's like, "You're not controllable anymore. I can't lead you anymore. So I'm done with you."
But see, this is the problem because nowhere does it say, I don't think the word actually is lead because people read. I just wrote about this on a blog, and the Bible's meant to be a mirror for ourselves to know how to behave and know what Jesus Christ is about from the beginning to the end. And
Mm,
what's happened is we've many denominations. I mean, if we really think about how many Christian denominations are out there, Nagbe,
mm-hmm.
thousands,
Yeah.
okay? And they all think they're right.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep creating more and more. Some might be called cults, some might be, are huge, whatever the case is. But when you're starting to take the word to start Bible darting others and using it as a
Mm-hmm.
weapon, then you just, to me, have become a Pharisee.
Exactly.
It's become a high controlling religion and not
Mm-hmm.
the pure relationship of Jesus Christ who does set us free.
And people start feeling that and thinking, so what's different between Christ and like for me, I was like, Christianity and Islam look the same when it becomes a religion.
Mm.
And Jesus is the opposite of that. So you kind of get into these religious structures and you're like, it looks the same as the other religions because Christianity isn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be actually Jesus spoke out against it. He spoke out against the hierarchy and the oppression and the abuse and that,
Exactly. Yeah,
yes.
he was a revolutionist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He
What
was a revolutionist. And I think it's like so many people I know people that know the word. And when I say they know the word, they know it, they know it, they know it. They're apologetics.
this is amazing.
It's amazing. They could recite it. They can, I don't, I'm not a theologian. I don't ever claim to be. I love the Lord with all my heart, soul, and mind. And I try to love my neighbor like myself. Right.
Mm,
But it's just like they want to be gatekeepers. You got the gatekeepers, and then you got the people on the other side, all the way on the other side, who it's all just the
yeah.
feelings, the feelings, and
Yes.
that's the thing is being as a Christian therapist. I've learned in the last 5 years, I had no idea that, and that's the thing that I try to get people to understand if they want the faith component is what flavor were you raised in? Because we usually
Mm,
see God as the
mm.
parental unit that raised us,
Yes, that's true.
right? So if
Yeah.
you were raised by an authoritative parent, then we're really into the wrath of the Lord. But if
Hmm.
we were raised by a like a hippie, ooh, Jesus movement kind of thing, then we're like, oh, he's just a hippie kind of guy that's all about love. Like, all right. So how
It's called hyper grace. The church I was in, it's like it's also dangerous because like there's no consequence for sin, not no calling out of sin, no protecting the sheep that are being like torn apart. It's all about grace, grace. Like
Mhm.
and then you have the other side where it's just like everything's yeah.
Yeah, yeah, everybody's going to hell, fire and
Yeah,
brimstone.
yeah.
So tell me, because what you experience, right? I know many. I read a book called by Tia Levings, and I don't think she came back to the Lord. I don't know her story. She says she's spiritually private. I haven't had her on my podcast, but I follow her work too. And it was a book that came out last year called "Escaping the Christian Patriarchy,"
Mm.
or I always butcher it. A well-trained wife. That's what it's called.
Oh, I've
A
heard about
well-trained.
it. It's
I
a good
read.
book. I need
I
to read it.
Yes, Naghmeh, but be careful because it might trigger because it made me so. My husband was like, "Put it down because you're being mean to me."
The good thing is I don't have a husband to be mean to, but there are books I have to read a little bit because I'm like, yes, yeah. Anyway, I was just on a podcast with the religion business people and they go into the details of just how it has become a business. We've become like the world in a lot of ways. And I can't, they have a docu-series. I can't watch too much of it because I'm like, I get so worked up.
Yeah,
But The Well-Trained Wife, I've had so many conversations with people about it. I haven't read it yet, but yeah.
yeah, and yeah, but I don't think that's where I want to get to, because you have gone through the fire. the fire. And when I say the fire, like I read, see, I'll start crying because it's like it's anger and grief and hope. It's like all these feelings and emotions put together when I'm reading your work, because to me,
Mm.
I'm like, all right, Lord, like we are your princesses, like,
Yeah.
we're the daughter of the king. And how do we move forward without putting the man down? Because that's a hard
Mm.
place for me, especially because I would just want to be like, oh, you guys
Ah,
suck.
yeah, no.
And I don't, because I have two sons.
Yeah.
I have three grandsons. I
They
want to.
can't suck.
Yes, exactly, Naghmeh.
And
So,
they don't. They're also made in the image of God. I have to be honest with you. I haven't really shared this anywhere else. I do struggle. I haven't been remarried. I haven't dated. I do struggle in stepping into a relationship with a male. Now I know they don't suck. I've had good male leaders in my life, and um, but we do have to be careful with that because it's either one is bad, one crushing the other, or but the reason I people say, what, how are you? How did you go? Because how am I still a Christian, or how am I still, walking with the Lord? Because my trauma didn't come just from a horrible, horrible marriage, abusive marriage. It came also from the church saying it's okay, and silencing me and trying to hide it, and even at the cost of possibly my life and my children's life, and in order to promote ministry,
mm,
his ministry or a ministry, or for wealth and power and money and fame. And so for me, the shocking thing was those who represented Christ to me, including like big names, that for me it was like there were certain names that were associated with God. Like Graham was like, for me, like, the Graham name was like God Graham name.
mhm,
And so certain and to have that kind of a misrepresentation of God,
yeah.
to me, that if you're crushed, it's okay. You submit no matter what, you stay no matter what, even to death, and be quiet, and we're going to silence you. For me, that was the biggest faith crisis, more than even my marriage, because I'm like, they're carrying the name of Jesus and they're saying this is okay. But all the each time, I've gone back to God, like, is this who you are? And like I've had a few like times where my roots had to go deep. I was a
Mhm.
missionary in Iran. I had guns pointed to my head telling me you're gonna die if you say you're a Christian. And that was actually a moment where I'm like, do I really believe this? This gun is real. Like, I don't know, how real is Jesus? Like,
Yeah.
everything with your body wants to save it. And so I've had those moments of like, how real are you? Who are you? And this happened with the way the church reacted to the abuse, that was just so misrepresenting of Christ. And I had to go back and be like, who are you, God? Like, is this who you are? Are they representing you well? And each time, by God's grace, my roots got deeper because I got to
Yeah.
know that's not who he is.
Can we talk about that a little? Because that's still happening in churches. Because I think that's what Julie Roys is trying to do, is restore the church. And I know she talks about how she gets called names and everything, right? Because
Hmm.
she is exposing things like, oh my God. I read just, I think it was the DC talk, and GC in your book where you were like, back then that song came out,
Oh,
Jesus, right? That was a big Jesus freak, right? And so
I
I
just had
remember
to
that.
delete all of their songs recently. I was like, I can't look. And Newsboys and DC
Ah.
Talk. I was like, now you
So,
see it in a different light.
well, that's the thing. We're supposed to evolve and grow and not be stuck. Number one. Number two is when we start idolizing leaders, humans, music, whatever it is. And I saw that kind of like, because I came in the faith at such a late age, and just everything I experienced, I saw, I was just like, wait a minute, this sounds like a biz. I would call out the deacons at our church
Hmm.
all the time. And I saw stuff too. This is where I was questioning things, because say I had a friend at church and I saw the abuse. I wasn't a
Hmm.
therapist then, but I was
Hmm.
working on becoming one. And
Hmm.
I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, like he never laid hands, but I could tell it was so controlling.
Yeah.
isolating her. And I would go, and that's one of the guys that came to my husband and says, you got to have your wife learn to be submissive. And then he
Mhm.
looked at the guy and was like, to you? Never. Like, what? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? But it was the control issue that I was seeing. And something happened with me at this church, and it was very frustrating because I'm the one who was the whistleblower, because the worship
Mm.
leader came in and he was very flirtatious, and he came, and I was a preschool teacher, a direct assistant director, and he came into my office and started calling me names, started trying to touch me.
Mm.
Little did he know that I come from being a cocktail waitress. I was a
Oh,
cocktail waitress. So I'm like, dude, you're acting like the guys that were
yeah.
hitting on me as a cocktail waitress.
Yeah.
But the director was in the room and he didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
So for me, I thought this was just how normal was how men were. So it was just
Mm.
boys would be boys. And I'm like, okay, get out of my
No.
office, you idiot. Right? I wasn't thinking. And she
Mm.
came and she said, we have to do something about this.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, Naghmeh.
Wow.
Yeah, but
That's
I,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. And but she was in tears and she's crying. I was used to being treated like a piece of meat because I did not know the Lord at that time, but I was working
Yeah.
at the school. You see what I'm saying?
And
So I
then you're like,
had,
not at the church, but like, it's surprising that someone spoke out for you at the church.
yeah, it became, but spoke out. Everything was hush hush quiet under the carpet.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I
Because you
want
don't
to,
want to, you don't want
no,
to damage the ministry. That's
yes,
ultimately the reason for it.
right now. It was
It,
damaging a bunch of male pride.
well, they think if the person who's doing it is a pastor, they're saying you bringing this to light could possibly crumble the church. And we don't want to do that. Look at the amazing work God is doing. And you said your friend that you noticed the abuse with, who was not being physical, was very controlling. Only physical abuse only happens when the person's losing control. Like, as long as the person's under control by the verbal and the spiritual abuse of submission,
Financial
financial, yeah,
abuse,
you don't
Bible
have to hit
guarding.
them.
Yeah,
You
no,
don't have to hit. And a lot of people in America don't hit
no,
because they know they'll get in trouble.
right.
So they're abusing
Hmm.
abusing in ways where they don't have to hit to control you. They're
Right.
like the financial, spiritual, all of that.
No.
But yeah, it's the biggest thing I got is Said was a big hero, Christian hero. Is like you're going to damage the cause of Christ if you talk about this. And that's not the God of the Bible. God has no problem talking about people's sin and exposing it.
Hello.
But
Right.
it's also the idolatry. You're right. It's the music industry is the same as you read the Roy's report. Is it's a culture of cover up. I mean, Michael Tate has been molesting boys and even participating in seeing a woman get raped for decades. How's that possible? There was that culture of cover up, and he's this idol, and so it finally comes out
Mm.
after money.
The
Yeah.
love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's the love of money, not money itself. It's the love.
Well, and then victims. Now you have this idolatrous system in Christian worship and Christian in music industry and church. So the victim is now speaking up and they're being crushed. They're like, be quiet. You're not, how dare you?
Right.
Whereas the church, it wasn't supposed to be like this, where there's someone at top. It's supposed to be brothers and sisters calling each other out all the time. But
Yeah.
it's shocking to the system when it's a hierarchy and you're like, wait a minute. And then you have not only the person at top denying it, now you have the those who've been groomed to protect the one at top who are idolatrous as like love their idol attacking you. So it's really rare for a victim to come forward and
Yeah.
speak up because they are crushed. I mean, I met the woman that spoke out for very first woman about Ravi Zacharias, and he was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
he had
That
a
was,
he
oh,
was spotless. He had no bad record because he kept shutting it down and she got crushed. No one believed her. But it
man.
eventually came back as a storm. All these women came forward too. But the first woman, Lori Ann Thompson, I met with her and she was crushed. She was,
So
yeah.
what do we do about it, Name? Like now that you've gone through all this and you've gathered wisdom, tools, understanding, how do we help the next generation? How do we protect them and do what is right in the eyes of the Lord, because I know that sometimes I could come and be in the flesh, right? Or how
Mm,
I put it, because remember, I work with non-Christians. So when I
mm,
try to explain things, I'm like, okay, that's your
yeah.
ego state, and you're wanting to work into humility, right?
Hmm.
Humility, flesh and spirit. Hello, you're a
Yeah,
Christian, so you
that's
get
what
what
it
I'm
is.
saying,
Yeah.
right? So how do we give the tools? Like what is it that we need to be doing from this point forward for anyone listening right now? Because we don't want to go and be these go crucify people or be just as bad as them, right?
Hmm.
And come at them with pitchforks and and stuff like that. But we do need to stand up for truth
Hmm.
and understand that Jesus Christ is the only way that's
Mm.
and really following that way to bring the peace and the unity and the understanding. And it's so hard
Hmm. He
because
is the way. He's the way to all of it, to the healing and the uh, uh, the corruption being exposed and addressed and healed and healing. As you said, Julie Royce talks about restoring the church in a way. Why? What it doesn't look like she's restoring. It looks like she's causing havoc because she's reporting on all these abuse. She's bringing it to light. When you have an infection, you got to bring it to light, and then you clean it up and it's cleaned up. So we have to really respect. We've been groomed in a culture where we protect our idol, we protect the leader, and we are like get a yucky feeling like, why are you causing division talking about this? Whereas the early church, I mean, you look at Paul and Peter, they had no problem calling each other out. There's no problem like exposing sin, and even sins that we wouldn't even consider sin today, like Ananias and Sapphira, they sold their vacation home and were giving it to the church. They just lied about the amount, like, and but it's this addressing sin was not a big deal. It was actually part of the early church. A lot of what it was just healthy, made the church healthy, like it was exposed. And I think really Jesus, in his humility, addressed things very seriously. He was not, like you said, in acting in pride and going after the oppressors, but in humility, he was very like, you brood of vipers, how dare you? How dare you use the name of God to oppress my people?
mm,
And so we have to have the same heart, like, how dare you carry the name of Christ, because the outside world is going to operate in power and pride. I mean, our example is Christ in crucifying self and operating in humility, and we have the power to do that through the Holy Spirit. The
mm,
outside world doesn't. In a way, and so in a way, we can be the example. I mean, I think the outside world can follow that example, and we see that in the early church. Like they were affected, the outside was affected by the way the church was behaving, and the fear of God, and so but we have that power to be able to be humble from the
yeah,
Holy Spirit. And so, but at the same time, Jesus in his humility said, you brood of vipers. And so in our humility, we can say, how dare you use the name of Jesus
yeah,
to oppress your congregants, oppress your wife, oppress, like, if you are put in a position of power, is only to give it up as a servant, like literally a slave. And that's the beauty of Christ. So I think we have to be okay with calling it out.
hmm,
And because of the hierarchy, we've been told not to. We've been told it's like damaging Christ and Christianity, the cause of Christ and Christianity, but it's not true. In the early church, it was like it wasn't this huge hierarchy. I mean, there was a board, there was like a leadership that kind of checked some of the teachings on like you eat meat to idols, but
right.
literally everyone was checking each other like, hey, you said that, or like we should be able to call each other out. But with the hierarchy, it's hard to do that. And it's the same with the Christian industry. It's just we've created this hierarchy that's not from God, and then now you're at the bottom and you're not supposed to call out the top. And
Mm.
it's super hard to call out the top. Like your voice is barely ever heard.
Or you're
And
crushed, or they gaslight, or they'll take your
Mhm.
name and go make it go through the mud. Or, I
Mhm.
mean, it's a real attack. I've seen it. I've seen it for myself back in the day. But
Mhm.
this is where we have to realize, like, come together. It's community. I mean, we're meant
Yes,
to be in community.
we
In
have.
a healthy community has ironing, sharpening
It
iron,
does.
right?
We should be able to call each other out in a
Yeah,
loving,
right.
gentle way. It's supposed to
Exactly.
be normal, but we've not
Yes.
normalized it. We're like, you're questioning the leader?
Yes, right. No, and guess what, Nagma? You and I are normalizing it right now. This episode should be coming out. This will be the first episode of 2026.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And
Interesting.
so starting the new year, right? And if there's somebody listening going, okay, what do we do? What do we do? What if I'm feeling like, oh, I need help? What what helped you, Nagme? Like seriously, because you're in a better space now. You're the phoenix that rose, right? And
Mhm.
you got the beauty from the ashes. What would you tell somebody right now that is where you were
Mhm.
back in 2016, 10 years ago?
Yeah, follow your savior, do what he does, and God will fight your battles. I was literally facing giants, Goliath, when I was, when my abuse stuff came out. It was the divorce that hit me and fighting for my kids' safety and for for my own safety and battling big name giants, Christian world of big names of trying to crush me. And yeah, in every way, I had, when the abuse had come out, I had stopped speaking at events. I didn't have an income, and now I'm like in the middle of a divorce and losing everything. And I literally like was crushed. I was tired of advocating for Saeed and now was facing another storm. I was facing the divorce and religious leaders. I saw God fight my battles, even though at times it felt like Psalm 37 and 73, it felt like evil was winning. But I kept trusting like he is a good God. This season will be over. Like there's always morning after the night. There's always like spring after the winter. And just trusting him and holding on to him every day and knowing that this is his battle, even though like you feel like you're facing giants, he's actually for you. He came for the oppressed. He came to preach the gospel to the poor. Like he is for you. And he himself, Jesus himself, one of the top things he talked about was that he addressed was oppression of religious leaders, oppression of in a home, someone who's supposed to be the leader, oppression of leaders, and that's very dear to the heart of God. And yeah, if you study the Bible from beginning to end, you see that's so important to God, addressing
Yeah.
oppression, and
Yeah.
especially people that use His name and oppress is like God is
Yeah.
like, nope, nope, nope.
Right. So besides the Bible, right, and your faith, was there an organization or something you read, or how did you escape? Because this is scary, and this is the first thing I tell anyone is you have to find safety. Safety. I know in Florida, here in Broward County, we have women in distress. Right. Go to
Mm,
women in distress. Go to the abuse hotline.
mhm.
What helped you, because that must have been super scary. Did you have community? Did you have someone, you don't have to name them because, I don't know. But I want to understand the resources
Yeah.
that you gathered to get you through this because that's so important. Like to
Hmm.
me, to give those tools, those
Yeah.
practical tips to a person that might
Mm.
be in the midst of it right now.
Well, at first I ordered a whole bunch of books when I realized that what I was under was abuse. And I
Wow.
started educating. Like first I Googled and then I was like, oh, there's books on abuse. I didn't even know like there was checklists. And then I found a abuse counselor that was Christian that really right right before Said was released, I think, as I was understanding abuse or right around that time. And he helped me walk through and the important part was you don't want to be like him. Like check yourself, act not in anger, act in humility and wisdom, because with anger comes a lot of foolishness. And so he really helped me fight the battle of not my flesh taking over, but like saying few words and even in court he was like giving me wisdom like let him talk first and Said
Yeah.
talked a lot and you say the minimum amount of words and be careful what you say in a secular court because it can be used against you as like
Hmm.
she's crazy. And but also I did have community, not a lot. I had thousands, and when my abuse stuff came out, I probably had three women, three people that like were like taking me to court and standing by me. And really, out of those three, a few fell by like eventually like
Hmm.
left too, and there was really only one. And but God gave me after the battle, God started giving me good girlfriends as well. But it was a lonely journey. But I had like a few good girlfriends that were like, we see what's happening. We are with you because everyone else was like, you're crazy. This is what you're doing. Saeed is a hero. Why would you do that? You're embarrassing Christianity. So I did have like a few people that stood by me. I had a counselor, books,
Do you
and
remember what books helped you?
and books have helped me over the years because what the books that I read, like what is like Leslie Vernick, she like I actually met with her. She was one of the first people that I met with
Wow.
when I read her book. I met with her, and she's one of the like emotionally destructive marriage or relationship because it really goes into detail. Like abuse is
Hmm.
not just physical, and
Right.
she taught me about reactive abuse when a woman might seem like they're like angry too, but they're reacting to abuse. And so she was from beginning of my journey. Leslie was part of it, and we're still friends.
Nice.
So yeah, books by Leslie Vernick, by Why Does He Do That? By I forget the author. There was just a lot. I read like probably 20 books
Hmm.
within like a month. I was just like devouring them. But it was all on abuse. And then the recent one that's not Christian that really like I think I read it a few years ago was When the Body Keeps the Score or something like that.
Yes, Bessel van der Kolk. Yeah, I talk about that all the time as a therapist.
For me, that was the wake up moment about my emotions. I was like,
Wow.
I've been shutting down my body. It's been talking to me.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the big one for me, the recent one. So first I learned about abuse, but over the years I've read books like,
Hmm.
When the Body Keeps the Score is that one like was huge because that was the first time like I've been shutting down the alarms that are telling me either triggers that are like I need to
Yeah.
work through or literal alarms that are telling me danger, danger, danger.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah,
that was a big one.
your check engine, right?
Yeah,
It's like your check engine light is on and you're like, nah, it's okay. Okay. Like, hello,
I'm
the
not.
gas light is on. Oh, no, no, I'm gonna ignore it until your
Yeah, yeah,
body finally
shuts down.
shuts down.
Yep.
For real. Wow. Oh my goodness. Now I could keep you on for another 3 hours, but I can't. I'm not going to because I'm sure we both have a lot to do. But so let's just now pivot just a little to share how can the audience find your work?
Well, I mean, like you said, my book kind of give tells my story, but I don't really have. I'm not like, yeah, I'm not like you. I don't really have work. I'm not a therapist. I'm not like. I've just come out through this journey myself, and um, I have social media, but I'm not, I don't really have a work. I mean, I started Tahrir al-Nisa, which in Arabic means freedom for women, setting
Mm-hmm.
women free with my co-founder, Miriam Ibrahim. And she has an amazing story. She was in prison in Sudan on death row for her Christian faith. And she gave birth to her daughter in prison, Maya. And she was also a big story right around the time my story was big. And she was literally rescued from prison. They were going to hang her, but they before they hang death by hanging because she was a Christian and she was supposed to be Muslim. And before they killed her, they tested her and they found out she was pregnant. And so they decided to let her have the baby and then kill her. But by the time she had her baby, the whole world knew about her and they got her out. She was in prison with her 10-month-old at that time when she was pregnant, Martin. But her story is also she comes out. Her husband is abusive. She's East Coast, and the church turns on her. And she says it was more devastating and confusing and damaging the way the church addressed her abuse than what happened to her in the Sudanese prison being on death row. And so we started this organization together to help women, going through domestic abuse, and we have some resources there, TAF.
Okay.
But we're not very active. We're both single moms.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it makes sense. Listen,
yeah.
Naghmeh, you're well, first of all, there's only one savior of this world, and that's Jesus
Mhm.
Christ. Number two, you went through so much, and it takes time. Especially if
Mhm.
you read The Body Keeps the Score, you understand that it is a process.
Yes.
It's a process because we have these parts of, I practice internal family systems and cognitive
Mm.
behavioral therapy in my work.
Mm.
And that's something that I try to get people to understand that, you know, being sanctified is a journey,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Takes
not,
time.
it takes time and it's not linear. And we can only do what we can only do with the bandwidth we have to stay healthy too, because
Mm.
you have to take care of yourself. Now that you understand that your body kept the score, you have to
Yeah.
have boundaries and say no and not take things personal and understand your mission, which is what God has put in your heart, right? So, any Bible verse or last words you would like to say to the audience before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I also want to say that sometimes you think you've walked through certain healing and then something else comes up that God brings
Yes.
up. So, like you said, it's not linear and it
Mhm.
takes time and
Yes.
it's a journey. So,
Yep.
the Bible verse, I that encouraged me, and I just is the that I'm about to do something new. Like that's been like huge, like because when you've lost everything, when you're crushed, it just feels like rubble. You're looking at rubble, and God will do something new. God will make a way when there's no way, and there's like
Yes.
desert, water in the desert. And I've seen that in my life, and I continue to hold on to that because a lot of times when you've walked through trauma and divorce and all of that, it just feels like you're sitting in the middle. That's how I felt. I was sitting in the middle of the rubble and thinking, is this ever going to like look like anything anymore?
Yeah.
And I just, that's what I want to encourage is that, yes, he is doing something new, and he will rebuild in a way that you never expected it.
Yeah. Especially, well, when you put him first.
Yeah, when you put him first, when you seek him.
Yes, when you seek him, you'll find him.
Yes.
Anyway, it is I Didn't Survive, Emerging Whole After Deception, Persecution, and Hidden Abuse. A true story. Naghmeh, thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And remember, audience, to please trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye.
Mhm.
And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.